2535 Gotta knock a little harder. After wielding a gun for the first time in his life, Sunny was highly amused. Wow, what a refined and lofty experience. He had already shot half a dozen enemies dead, and he wasn't even out of breath. All he needed to do in order to kill someone was point the gun in their general direction and pull the trigger. Sure, there was a lot of noise, some recoil, and he had to run around and crouch from time to time, but overall, Sunny had not broken a sweat yet. It was in such stark contrast with how he usually fought battles. Out there in the real world, Awakened almost always engage their enemies in melee. It was an intense, demanding process that put a dire strain on the entire body. Every blow reverberated in their very bones, and every clash left them feeling bruised and battered even if they had not sustained any injuries. It was utterly exhausting. Even ranged weapons such as bows, slings, and javelins required one to exert themselves until their muscles were on the verge of tearing. Compared to that, using a gun was like a leisurely walk in the park. So, Sunny was slowly developing a very positive opinion of this quaint weapon. That was until he got shot in the chest, of course. Oh oof. Before Sunny knew it, he was thrown back. The air had been pushed out of his lungs, and his entire body went numb for a few seconds. The pain of the impact had not arrived yet, but he could already tell how much it was going to hurt all too soon. The bulletproof vest seemed to have caught the bullet, and yet Sunny felt like he was back in Antarctica, being kicked by Goliath all over again. Damn it. He staggered back into the guard tower and almost rolled down the stairs. He would have, if not for the fact that Morgan caught him calmly by the collar. Her fingers sliced through the fabric of his jacket and left shallow cuts on his skin, but it was better than breaking his neck on the stone steps. The other Mordred hurriedly pulled Sunny back to the landing. Detective Sunless, are you all right? Sunny gave him a pained look and finally managed to push some air into his lungs. His entire chest felt like one big bruise, and his ribs were pulsing with pain. He missed bone weave. All right, is a strong word. I'm some right, lot guns. Looking at his own revolver in utter disgust, Sunny suppressed a pained groan. What a barbaric, vulgar weapon it was. Truly something that only shameless people would use, talentless hacks who lacked taste and discernment, let alone the training and dedication needed to wield more deserving weapons. Cursing under his breath, Sunny leaned into the doorframe of the guard tower, hurriedly discharged his remaining rounds into one of the mercenaries, and ducked back. Effie retreated into the protection of the tower at the same time, breathing heavily as she pressed herself into the cold stones. A rain of bullets hit the opposite wall a split second later, showering them in stone dust. There's really a lot of them there. Sunny cursed again while reloading his gun. They tried to open fire once more, but had to retreat behind cover almost instantly. The narrow entrance to the battlements was a natural bottleneck that made for a deadly firing range. With how many henchmen there were on the castle wall, advancing further seemed like an impossible task. There was a silver lining to their difficult situation, though. As long as the mercenaries were concentrating their fire on Sunny and Effie, they were not shooting Saint. I think we need a plan. Effie glanced at him, then at the doorframe of the guard tower. Then, she holstered her revolver and grinned. One plan, coming right up. Sunny raised his eyebrows. What are you? Before he could finish the sentence, Effie left her cover and stepped into the open. A bullet grazed her forearm, but she ignored it and grabbed the handle of the door they had thrown open a little earlier, then slammed it shut. Then, still holding the handle, Effie took half a step back and slammed her shoulder into the heavy wooden door, taking it clean off its hinges. As Sunny's eyes widened, both Effie and the door continued moving, flying into the open. Before the door fell, however, Effie grabbed its side with her other hand and held its massive weight in front of her. It was as if she was holding an oversized tower shield, using it to repel the barrage of bullets. You lunatic. Using the momentum to propel herself, Effie dashed forward. He could see her muscles straining to bear the weight of the heavy wooden door, but even though it was being pummeled by a barrage of bullets, Effie did not drop it. Neither did she slow down. A few moments later, Effie crashed into the mercenaries like a bowling ball, sending several of them flying off the tall wall into the courtyard. A few more were either thrown to the ground or incapacitated, with too many broken bones between them all to count. Finally losing balance, Effie dropped the door and fell down, as well. Devoid of her improvised tower shield and sprawled on top of it, she was a perfect target for the remaining mercenaries. However, none of Maddox's henchmen received a chance to shoot her while she was down. Because Sunny had not been just watching Effie's mad dash with an open mouth. Almost immediately after she dashed out of the guard tower, he followed. Now, jumping over her, he found himself standing between the remaining mercenaries. They were in the process of raising their guns to aim at him, but to Sunny, it seemed like they were moving in slow motion. He grinned. "Let me impart some culture to you, savages." Pulling his knife out of a hidden sheath on the small of his back, he held it in his left hand while the revolver was in his right. Then, Sunny raised his gun and shot the first of the mercenaries in the face. "Let me teach you the real meaning of savagery, as well." 2536 Savage Future. Dodging a bullet was impossible, well, for a mundane human, at least. However, dodging a gunshot was not that hard. After all, the Shisho otter had to raise their arm, take aim, and squeeze the trigger. The hammer had to strike, and the gunpowder had to explode, propelling the bullet forward. All of that took time. At long distance, there was still little one could do to avoid being shot despite having ample time to react. Things were different in close quarters, though, especially if a fighter was well trained. And there was hardly a more trained fighter than Sunny in all of Mirage City. Even lacking the ability to sense shadows and use shadow dance, he still possessed a profound knowledge of countless battle styles and a keen understanding of the fundamental laws of combat, not to mention a morbidly rich battle experience. So, now that Sunny was among the mercenaries, they were already doomed. He shot the first one in the face, then moved to escape the line of fire of the second one. A deafening gunshot rang out, but the bullet whistled past him. A moment later, Sunny kicked a henchman in the chest, sending him plummeting off the battlement. Taking a swift step forward, he used the mercenary whose bullet he had dodged to shield himself from the guns of two more. They lingered for a split second, hesitant to shoot their own comrade, and he used that split second to plunge his knife into his neck. By then, someone else was already aiming at him. Pushing the body of the mercenary at his two friends to slow them down a little, Sunny leaned back to avoid another bullet, then leapt forward. His knife hissed, slicing the shooter's wrist and forcing the henchman to drop his gun. At the same time, Sunny's revolver barked twice, and the backs of the heads of the two mercenaries who were staggering because of the thrown body exploded into a bloody haze. "Let's dance." Sunny grinned wickedly. Wielding a gun and a knife, he tore through the remaining mercenaries like a somber reaper. The battlements were relatively narrow, and their numbers were of little use when the enemy was that close. On the contrary, they were a hindrance, since those closer to him prevented those further behind from firing. The mercenaries were better equipped and far better trained than the members of the Black Snake Gang, but they were just as powerless to stop his swift and cold-blooded advance. Blood spilled on the cold stones, mixing with rainwater. Effie joined him halfway into the slaughter, while Morgan covered them both with several well-placed shots from the safety of the guard tower. By the time Sunny discharged his sixth and last round, there was a pile of bleeding bodies on the battlements, as well as under the wall in the courtyard below. The remaining henchmen fled, retreating into the main keep. Making sure that nobody was moving, Sunny exhaled slowly and leaned on the parapet to try to catch his breath. This one skirmish seemed to drain him considerably. "I have mundane stamina now. Ah, what a pitiful existence." All he had done in the past few days was avoid sleep altogether, throw an assassin out of a window, fight Mordred, kill a few thugs targeting Saint, survive a car crash, fight some more thugs, do a bit of investigating, storm an ancient castle under a deluge of bullets, get shot, and dispatch a dozen mercenaries in hand-to-hand combat. And just because of these few measly things, he was already tired. How embarrassing. Sunny was suddenly glad that he had only started dating Neffys after becoming a saint. Morgan and the other Mordred caught up with them while he was trying to recover. The latter glanced around the scene of mayhem with wide eyes and then turned to him with a bright smile. "Goodness. Detective, you." Just then, something boomed thunderously down in the courtyard, and the entire castle shook. A pillar of fire rose above the walls for a moment and then collapsed, suffocated by the rain. Ignoring the dull pain in his chest, Sunny took a few steps to the edge of the battlements and peered down. Mordred seemed to have dealt with Maddox's henchman on the other side of the wall and was nowhere to be seen. All that remained in his wake was a trail of bodies. The mercenaries in the courtyard itself had retreated into the main keep, but not before detonating some kind of explosives, it seemed. Or perhaps it was just one of the construction machines that had exploded when a stray bullet hit its fuel tank. Out there below them, Saint slowly rose from the fire, just as aloof as always. Black smoke and white mist spun around her like a fierce whirlwind, making her onyx-black hair flutter wildly in the wind. Her eyes seemed to glow red as they reflected the dancing flames. "She's all right," Sunny let out a relieved sigh. Saint turned and glanced up, staring directly at him as she absorbed the white mist. Raising a hand, Sunny pointed to the magnificent keep of the castle and shouted, "Keep! Let's rendezvous in the main keep." She glanced at him for a few seconds, then nodded silently and headed toward the heart of the ancient castle with steady steps. Sunny turned to his companions and pointed to where an aerial bridge connected the battlements to the towering keep. "We should hurry, too." Sheathing his knife, he searched his pocket and pulled out a bullet, his last bullet, it seemed. Sunny sighed. "I'm out." He glanced at Effie, who shrugged. "Me too. Oh, and I dropped my gun when I was hauling that door. It's somewhere in the courtyard." Morgan simply shrugged. "I'm on my last drum. Couldn't you have shaken off those gangsters for more ammunition?" Sunny coughed, then winced when that caused a flash of pain to radiate from his bruised ribs. "Hey, it's not an armory, okay. I took everything they had." Loading the last round into his revolver, he gripped it and looked ahead, at the great keep of Mirage Castle. Matic was somewhere in there, and something was telling him that the Castellan was there, as well. Sunny holstered the revolver and unsheathed his kappa knife. "Let's go. We have a criminal mastermind to catch." 2537 bullet time. Day row ite the losses Matic's private security forces had suffered, there was still a small army of mercenaries left in the castle. It did not matter much that the outer wall had been breached. The main keep itself was designed with defense in mind, so carving a path to Matic was not going to be easy. Especially with how low Sunny and his companions were running on bullets. See, one more reason why a sword is a superior weapon, the only thing you can run out of when using a sword is enemies to kill. If one was awakened, naturally. Sadly, Sunny wasn't awakened at the moment. Even if someone presented him with a sword right now, he would not be too happy. After all, even he was not mad enough to bring a sword to a gunfight. So, he was a little troubled. They made a move to rush toward the main keep, but at that moment, a polite cough interrupted them. The other Mordred seemed to linger behind, failing to follow them. Sunny glanced at him with a frown. "What are you doing? There's no time to waste." Mordred looked between him, Effie, and Morgan with an awkward expression, then opened his mouth hesitantly. "I am terribly sorry, and I don't mean to presume. But I could not help but wonder." He pointed down. "Why don't you just take their guns?" Sunny blinked a few times. "What is he?" Then, he blinked a few more times and looked down with an unreadable expression. The battlements were covered in bloody puddles and dead mercenaries. Each of those mercenaries had wielded a gun. Those guns were now littering the scene of carnage, soaking in the rain. Why had they not thought of picking them up, indeed? Sunny suppressed the desire to palm his face. "It's the lack of sleep." Morgan answered for him. "It's because we're awakened." Sunny looked at her with surprise. Noticing his expression, she shrugged. "Everyone has subconscious biases. For awakened, weapons are synonymous with memories, and memories disappear when their master dies. So, no one would think to pick up a slain enemy's weapon. This behavioral pattern is so ingrained in us that we don't usually entertain such thoughts. The situation might have changed, but our biases remain the same." Sunny studied her with a dubious expression for a few seconds. "You're just saying a lot of big words to hide the fact that you are embarrassed too, aren't you?" Not expecting a response, he turned to the other Mordred. "To answer your question, it's because this one is in the habit of using wooden doors as weapons, this one is still coming off an entire cocktail of powerful tranquilizers, and I hate guns." He looked down. "Ah, but even though I detest them, I guess I'll make an exception just this once." With that, he leaned down and picked up a pistol, then stared at it in confusion. "Huh." Sunny looked at Effie and Morgan sheepishly. This one doesn't have a drum. Or a hammer. How do I load it, and how does it fire?" Morgan closed her eyes for a moment, then leaned down to pick up a gun of her own. She also searched the nearest few bodies and retrieved a few thin rectangular pieces of metal from them. These are semi-automatic pistols, not revolvers. The mechanism is a bit different, but the end result is the same. "And these are magazines. You load them into the handle, like this." Sunny stared. "How do you know all this?" Morgan looked at him with a peculiar expression. "Because traditional firearms are still widely used in the modern day. These are still standard issue for most mundane soldiers and law enforcement officers. Even elite units equipped with magnetic mass drivers like the Gauss rifle still keep a semi-automatic pistol as sidearms, due to how reliable they are. The design is almost entirely the same, too. Gunpowder still rules mundane battlefields." Sunny glanced at the pistol in his hand silently. "Wait, So these, primitive, archaic weapons, weren't archaic at all. They were still being used in the real world. Suddenly, he felt like a complete fool. No, how was I supposed to know? It wasn't like I was assigned to a regular unit in the evacuation army. And the thugs in the outskirts never used this type of gun, either. Let's get some magazines, then. They were already lagging behind Mordred and Saint. So, they needed to hurry. They rushed across the outer wall and entered the aerial bridge connecting it to the main keep. The bridge had been raised by the workers renovating the castle and was quite treacherous, especially in the pouring rain. Nevertheless, they reached the door leading into the keep safely. Any pretense of safety went out of the window the second they entered it, however. Knowing that a squall of bullets would meet them inside, Sunny broke into a run and dove into the open door at full speed. He opened fire while still flying through the air. Time seemed to slow down as he saw half a dozen henchmen hiding over turntables, aimed his gun as best he could, and pulled the trigger. Bullets tore through the air, missing him by mere centimeters. At the same time, display cases behind the mercenaries exploded into glass shards as his own bullets hit the wall. Sunny landed in a roll and dashed toward a pile of construction materials, sliding behind it while shooting several more times. This time, his aim was much better. One of the mercenaries let out a pained scream and fell to the floor, clutching his shoulder. More importantly, Sunny's explosive entrance gave Effie and Morgan an opportunity to open fire at the distracted enemies from the doorframe. The ambush at the entrance hall was annihilated in a matter of moments. But there were numerous halls in the great castle, and numerous narrow corridors. If they had to fight their way through each one, someone was going to be hit by a stray bullet sooner or later. There was a muffled roar from somewhere down below, and the entire fortress shook. Saint was still pursuing the retreating mercenaries, it seemed. Sliding a new magazine into her scavenged pistol, Effie gave Sunny a questioning look. Where to now? He looked at the next door darkly. To the throne room.